Hello, everybody, and yeah, welcome back to another video.
Oh, hello.
Today is going to be a little different. I've been doing so many like deck profiles and stuff like that, but I haven't had a video where I just sit and chat with you about some stuff about the game. So that's what we're going to do today. Yeah, today we're going to be talking because about Sword and Shield, because it's coming out very soon, right? The Cosmic Eclipse era is winding down. I think there's only maybe one weekend left of cups and challenges. So by the time this comes out, everything you need to know about that will already be done. You know, the format is a lot of great decks, a lot of great options, but the format I think has gotten a little bit, I don't know, I'm tired of Pokemon communication. Let's just be frank. So let's look ahead to Sword and Shield and let's think about, okay, what is going to be coming out in the new set? How will that change maybe how the game is played? What potential rules might be changing as well? So yeah, let's just sort of jump into a post Sword and Shield world. What does that look like? And insert the doodly doos from Wayne's World here. In an era of Sword and Shield, I think one of the big things that is obvious if you know anything about the new cards that are coming out is they're not coming out with any more GX cards, right? The GX cards of the Sword and Shield era are going to be called Pokemon V, and there's a whole new mechanic, sort of, mechanics may be the wrong word, but there's a whole new thing, which is VMax cards. So I think from what I hear, I'm not familiar with this era of the game, but you had, Mega Evolutions. So it's kind of like that, where you have a Pokemon that you evolve into even higher state, let's say. I think VMAXs are kind of like that. But yeah, they're evolutions of Pokemon Vs, which is really cool. I like the idea that, like, okay, well, you can have a card that's potentially powerful, but it kind of pushes you away. It starts pushing us back away from this big basic era that I think we have sort of fallen into with tag team Pokemon especially. So we're being slowly pushed away from a big basics into an even bigger stage 1 era. Now, what do V and VMax have to offer a Sword and Shield landscape beyond just being new types of GXs, really? Well, I think the important part here is that with Vs and VMaxs, cards like Keldeo, cards like Mewtwo and Mew, a bunch of cards out there whose abilities or other aspects of that card specifically call out GX and EX Pokemon, those Pokemon are no longer going to be as relevant. So Keldeo is there to wall the most powerful Pokemon in the game today. Currently, like, that works. But with a Pokemon V, it can just hit right through Keldeo, no problem. And a lot of these Pokemon V and VMAXs can easily knock out a Keldeo for 170. So I think things like Keldeo are only going to stick around insofar as people continue to play GX heavy decks. I think what you're really going to start seeing, though, is a mix of GX and V and VMAX decks, like sort of mixing those two cards together. And I think that'll make cards like Keldeo, cards like the Alolan Ninetales that blocks attacks, cards like that not really as relevant. I even feel bad, to be honest, for Alolan Persian. Now, the benefit of Alolan Persian is it also blocks Ultra Beasts in general, as well as Special Energy, which, you know, we're getting some cool Special Energy, so maybe Alolan Persian will have some support still, but for the most part, and even Mewtwo and Mew, right? Mewtwo and Mew only derives all of its attacks from GXs, so right now, all of the attacks that Mewtwo and Mew are ever going to have exist today. So the question is going to be, can all of those attacks live up to an era where you have Pokemon VMAX? That's going to be a big question for Mewtwo and Mew. But I would say things like Keldeo, Mewtwo, and Mew are going to suffer because of this, but it opens up the format, I think, to all these new Pokemon. Secondly, like, you also have things like Great Catcher. Great Catcher was amazing for the last little bit of Sun and Moon, but now that Great Catcher is only going to be good at catching Dedennes and other GX Pokemon, I think you're going to have a lot of decks start putting back in things like Custom Catcher, which is honestly a little bit like, Custom Catcher is such a bad card. But Maybe you'll have people play Pokemon Catcher as well, where you roll for heads or tails. But yeah, I think custom catchers will, I hope you didn't sell your playsets of custom catchers when Great Catcher came out, because you're gonna need them again. So yeah, things like Great Catcher will also be far less relevant. You may only play one of them just to grab a Dedenne on the bench maybe. So that's, I think, the first big thing, is that we're losing GXs, but we're getting Vs and VMaxs, this whole other type of card. The second thing that sort of drafts off of the VMax energy is evolution decks are going to be way more viable starting February, because we're getting two cards in particular that really help that out. We are getting Quick Ball, which, if you don't know what this is, Quick Ball basically says discard a card from your hand and you can search your deck for a basic Pokemon. Doesn't matter the type, it's a Nest Ball and an Ultra Ball sort of put together to go get basics. It's a great card that is gonna make things like Pokemon communication not necessary in many decks. I love this because it's been so exhausting to play any sort of deck that runs on Pokemon that are not Dragon, Psychic, Grass, or GX. Like, outside of those four types, it's like there's no way to search out Pokemon directly, as far as I understand it, right? So this finally makes it puts every deck on a level playing field from a can I find this Pokemon standpoint. So yeah, Quick Ball is amazing. And what Quick Ball enables is non-GX basics that eventually evolve into something too. And then there's another card that helps you get those evolutions. And that card is, I think it's called Evolution Incense. Basically, what this card says is search your deck for an evolution Pokemon and put it into your hand. It doesn't have to be a Pokemon that evolves from a Pokemon you have in play. That's a very important distinction. So even things like Mewtwo and Mew could use this to go get some of its evolution GXs. So you have even more sort of Cherish Ball outs, if you will. But this card and Quick Ball together make evolution decks completely viable again. Those two things, plus, you have a few supporters out there that do similar things, but really these two item cards are going to completely turn around the idea of evolution decks. And obviously, this is something that, Pokemon wants, right? Pokemon, they have their starters in all their new sets. They want people to play them, right? Rillaboom, Inteleon, and Cinderace. They want people to play their, mascots for the new series. Well, the only way people are going to play a Stage 2 mascot is if you can get it out of your deck when you need to. So it's kind of, from a marketing standpoint, they're kind of forced to print cards like this, but I think that's really good for the game in general. So that's the second thing. Evolution decks are completely valid. If there's an evolution deck that you've been keeping in your binders that you've been wanting to play, I know me personally, I'm going to be playing, I think, a little bit of Whimsicott because I think that deck is going to have a lot of interesting support. But yeah, a lot of other evolution decks are going to have a lot of opportunity. So break the binders out, dust off those evolutions, and see what kind of cards and decks that you can build. Now, this next one is a proposed rule not proposed, but it's an expected rule change that has gone into effect in Japan and hasn't been officially announced in America. Pew, 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 pew. Just an update here. So we are getting word. Try to adjust this up a little bit. We are getting word. So let's talk about a couple of the rule changes. So first turn, if you go first, no supporter, confirmed. As of today, when I'm recording this part of the video, which is different. Hi, buddy. So, as I predicted, yeah, that's confirmed. The other thing, the only other thing which I would say is probably the biggest one, is that Fairy-type Pokemon are no more as of Sword and Shield. Current Fairy Pokemon in Standard will continue to exist. Fairy-type energy can still be obviously used on those Pokemon, but that will be rotated out eventually. They're not going to be printing Fairy-type energy anymore. So if you have any secret Fairy energies and you're not planning on using them, now is a good time to sell them. Or if you really want to put them for PSA, because there'll be a a historical artifact soon. But yeah, fairy type Pokemon are going away, which is interesting, right? Like, friends are talking about this. Does that mean that dragon type Pokemon no longer have any weakness? I doubt it. That seems a little too broken for dragon types. Maybe though, for dragon types, because you require multiple energies, they felt like having a one-shot weakness was unfair because it's hard to power those up normally. Or it could be the dragon type Pokemon have variable weaknesses based on the types of energy that are required. Who knows? But I just wanted to update you on that. Yeah, those are the two things that really, I think, matter from the big update today. I'm trying to look through and see if there's any other major changes. I mean, there's minor card text changes and things like that. And then I guess they're going to have something called Pokemon Checkup instead of between turns phase. So first you check for special conditions, then you check the abilities and effects of trainer cards that happen during Pokemon Checkup. So I think what you can expect to see is trainer cards, etc., that have text called during Pokemon Checkup, which basically means between turns. But that always happens before a Pokemon is knocked out. So yeah, between turns at least. So if you have like a poison that's going to go into effect, but you played a trainer card that says at the end of your turn, if any of your Pokemon are affected by special conditions, heal that. You can heal that first. Then you won't have any poison, then the damage counter won't apply, then you won't be knocked out, then you won't lose the game. So I think that's why they wanted to maybe add in that text. But anyways, that's it. Just a couple of little updates and announcements. Back to wherever part of the video I edit this into. And that's why I think the no supporter for the first player on their first turn. That's a rule that went into effect in Japan. I'd put money on the fact that it's coming to America with the release of Sword and Shield. It may even be announced by the time this video comes out. But no supporter turn 1 if you go first. Now, that sounds really bad. And maybe it is pretty bad in some ways. I was speculating a few months ago when they announced this rule change for Japan, what the reasoning could have been. At the time, I was like, maybe it has something to do with Welder. But in reality, I think it has more to do with cards like Marnie and Jesse and James, reset stamps, all of these things that disrupt your opponent's hand before they even have a chance to play a card. I think Pokemon is looking at that and saying, no. In order to have a really level playing field, we need everyone who draws their first set of cards into their hand to have the opportunity to play that amount of cards turn 1. Any other situation is simply unfair. And I think that, honestly, I think that makes sense. If you're going to print cards like Judge, Marnie's, etc., it's just not fair if player 1 can burn through 10 cards in their hand and through their deck, and then throw down a Judge or a Marnie at the end of their turn, and then you're left there with like 4 or 5 cards going, are you kidding me? Like, I had 2 more cards to start this. That's not fair. So anyways, I think that makes sense. But what that means is there's going to be a bunch of decks that, maybe going second starts to be a better strategy. For decks that already go second, no impact, really. There's no impact on this. In fact, I think those decks have a little bit of a boost because their opponents can't get going as fast. But for other decks, and especially new decks, you might choose to go second in some instances. And then it also adds support to the Zacian V deck, because Zacian V has an ability that lets you draw 3 cards at the end of your to end your turn, and attach any metal energy you find there if you want. Again, the nice thing about that is it's another way of okay, well, I can't use the supporter, but I can maybe get some energy acceleration and I can draw extra cards. So one of their, poster child sort of Pokemon, Zacian, they've given it an ability that specifically counteracts this no supporter. So you still can go first with that deck and get some good digging in. So what that also means, though, is that Dedenne will continue to be a very relevant card for either player, whichever turn, because you don't know if you're always going to go first or second. And if you end up going first and you need to dig, Dedenne is going to be very important to doing that. So hold on to the Dedennes. I know they're a liability on a bench, but they're still going to be really, really valuable at digging into your deck, especially if you go first. And I think the last aspect of Sword and Shield that my brain is sort of considering is with VMax Pokemon now having 300 plus HP, going all the way up currently to 340 HP. And then you also have things like buff padding for the Snorlax VMAX that put it up to 390 HP. You know, these Pokemon have massive, massive health. I think the question becomes, is it still valuable to try to build a deck around one-hit KOing your opponent? Now, there's pros and cons to this, right? The pros are if you can OHKO a VMAX Pokemon, that's probably a lot of resources that your opponent loses. You take 3 prizes, you basically, force your opponent into a bit of a pickle. The downside to that is the amount of resources you probably have to put out in order to one-hit KO a Pokemon VMAX is probably high in most cases. Think about Blacephalon, Baby Blacephalon, Mewtwo and Mew with Magcargo, etc. There's going to be very few Pokemon that have one-hit KO potential. But even if they do, you're still discarding a ton of energy to get there. Or in the case of another VMAX Pokemon like Lapras that can have a one-hit KO on anything, you're having to load it up with so much energy that if that Pokemon gets knocked out on the subsequent turn, you're really in a bad spot. So I do think there's something interesting to consider when you're building your decks is this a deck that can survive having to two-hit KO an opponent? I think things like the Snorlax will try to force you into 3-4 hit KOs with all their healing as well. So you have to come up with a strategy to sort of stop that. I think you still have to hit pretty hard, but if you have to 2-hit KO everything, is your deck built to handle a return attack from your opponent? And if not, you really need to streamline your deck to take those one-hit knockouts. So that's just sort of the last little bit of post Sword and Shield that I think is interesting to consider. Currently, we're not necessarily a one-hit KO meta, but decks like Mewtwo and Mew do have one-hit KO potential very early. Decks like Blacephalon, Baby Blounce have one-hit KO potential. But are those decks still going to be relevant if they have to stretch even harder? So, good thing to keep in mind. But yeah, that is it for my post Sword and Shield thoughts. It's hard to say what the right decks are going to be. I've been testing a lot of stuff. You can see those videos here. Just take a look around the channel. Let me know what you think about post Sword and Shield. What are you most excited about? What are you most anxious about, nervous about? I think is a good one. But yeah, let me know in the comments, and I will catch you all in a future episode. Carpe awesome.